some of the most common names there, the most common ties were the ultra processed food manufacturers like Nestle, like Unilever, like Danone, Kellogg's, General Mills. Those companies come up again and again and again as being involved in virtually every process in nutrition policy in Washington, D.C.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing a reaction to a really important interview that Dr. Berry just did with Nina Teicholz. In case you don't know who Nina is, take a look at this quick summary that I prepared. It's from a previous video, just so I don't have to chew my cabbage twice. Or I don't eat cabbage, but you know what I'm saying. Just take a look. And finally, we have the one journalist the global food cartel truly fears, Nina Teicholz. She's the Rumpelstiltskin of nutrition policy, the relentless fact checker that can name the lies that unravel their entire empire. Nina Teicholz is an investigative science journalist and the New York Times bestselling author of The Big Fat Surprise. She actually holds a PhD in nutrition and founded the Nutrition Coalition, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring nutrition policy reflects the best science. Her philosophy is a masterpiece of exposure. Teicholz meticulously exposed how the entire anti-fat, anti-saturated fat campaign, the very foundation of modern nutritional policy, was built on flawed or weak evidence. She advocates for the return of butter, meat, and cheese, arguing the science supports the safety of whole natural animal fats. Her work led to Congress mandating a review of the U.S. dietary guidelines. While the doctors challenge Big Pharma, Nina Teicholz challenges the policies of the food industry titans. The Eat Lancet agenda depends on the belief that red meat and saturated fat are inherently bad. Nina's work tears down that core premise, making it impossible for the elites to claim scientific legitimacy for their global meat reduction policies. She ripped the very rug of credibility out from under the multi-trillion-dollar industry's decades-long war on meat. In addition to all of that, she's been working with the current U.S. administration trying to expose and rectify the lies of the unholy demon spawn of the USDA food pyramid known as the MyPlate program. It's ridiculous. It should have been called Type 2 Tuesdays or something. But it's all just sugar and sadness, my friend, disguised as healthy food. Populating the world with diabetics, just one little MyPlate at a time. So in today's episode of Mrs. Teicholz Goes to Washington, she talks to Dr. Berry about how it's been going as she tries to drain the big food and big agriculture swamp in D.C. She really gives some serious tea in this conversation. It's something that you do not want to miss. So let's get into this.
Nina, welcome. Good to have you with me again.
Hi, Ken. Great to see you, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I was just introducing this topic to everyone. Nina is the author of the huge bestseller, The Big Fat Surprise. If you haven't read that or listened to it, you need to, because I think that was one of the very first paradigm shifting works that available to the general public, that people could read it, and it's very well documented. But then they could read that and go, "Oh, okay, I kind of."
That's true. If you guys have never read that, get it on like Audible or something and listen to it, or just buy it and read it. It is a pivotal book in the low carb space. It was one of the OGs, so it's a good one to read if you haven't read it.
I see what you're talking about now. That book's on my shelf. I'm very proud to display that. I've read it twice, listened to it probably twice again. Nina, welcome. Tell us what is going on with the current administration at the federal government level and the U.S. dietary guidelines.
Yeah, well, just to set the stage for your listeners and viewers, the U.S. Dietary Guidelines for Americans is the most influential policy on nutrition, on diet. It is the key lever affecting what people think is a healthy diet and what people are required or what they're fed in school lunches, feeding programs for the elderly, what the military is taught to eat. The military has an obesity problem almost equal to the general population. The food, what we used to call food baskets, now called for women and infant children.
That's crazy that the obesity rates in the military are so high. I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize that it was kind of the same or close to being the same as the population. But one of the things that people always say is like, well, I don't go to look at the food pyramid. And I've heard this a lot. I don't look at the food pyramid. Well, now it's not the food pyramid, but I don't go to the government to figure out how to eat. So why is anybody worried about what they say? But as she explains in this interview, and a lot of people don't understand that regulations, as being a regulatory person, okay, regulations are everything. If you can put regulations in place that state how you do things, what you do, where you do it, you can control a lot. This is about power and control and money.
And they are downloaded as the gold standard for all health practitioners. So doctors, nurses, dietitians, nutritionists. So even though you think these guidelines don't affect you and you think, I don't go to a .gov website to learn about diet, these guidelines come to you through your doctor, through your nutritionist. They're fed to your kids at schools, and they're hugely important. And what has been wrong with them since they were launched in 1980, the most well-known graphic, although it's no longer used, but is the food pyramid that everybody knows. That big bottom slab is all grains and starches.
If you want to know, I'll just interject here. If you want to know the history of that whole food pyramid thing, like how it came to be, what it was first, all of its iterations, I did a video. I'll put the graphic up here. I did a video explaining the history of that, and it's all of it is about government control. All of it is, lobbying and big interest and just corruption. It was not about health, really. At one point, it was about war, which, had to do with rationing. But outside of that, it's all the lobby of, big food, big ag.
And they're still recommending 6 to 7 servings of grains a day, including 3 servings of refined grains every day, 5.5 teaspoons of seed oils as your added source of fat, and up to 10% of calories as sugar. And there is no limit to the amount of sugar that can be fed to children in schools. So I would say it's not an extreme statement to say there's no way to fix children's health without fixing our guidelines. Kids are getting up to half their calories if they have lunches and breakfasts in their schools. And so this is the most important policy change that will happen in Washington on food, right? We've been hearing so much from the so-called Make America Healthy Again movement about how they're going to reverse chronic disease and take care of our children's health. This is the policy that may or may not, but this is the policy on which all that really rides. So just to understand where we are in this process, Ken already explained they come out every 5 years. A new edition is set to come out by the end of this month or early next month. And it is highly unusual what has happened in this go around of the guidelines. Normally, the guidelines happen all under one administration. So Obama.
She's going to explain basically the politics of how the guidelines are looked at. And I want to say this right off the bat. This is not a political discussion, really. It is a discussion about the machine, okay? Because whether you're left, you're right, it does not matter. Not that there's, in some aspects of the government, there is no left and right. There's just the machine. They give the illusion that there's a left and right in some cases when it comes to, and all I'm talking about, I'm not talking about who you vote for and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the government as a system. Here or out.
has his guidelines, and Biden was supposed to have his guidelines, but his administration ran out of time. They came up with an expert report that is written by what's called the Dietary Guideline Advisory Committee. It's appointed. It's a group of 20 experts that write a report, but then they ran out of time to actually write the guidelines from that expert document.
It makes you wonder what they're doing. Like, how did they run out of time? Government is just in general so efficient, and you hear about all of these projects that they do, and it'll be like, years and years and years and years, and then they don't even finish anything. I think government, it's not ha-ha funny, but it's funny,
So now it's in the control of the current administration, and it's the folks who are in charge of writing the guidelines are at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which I think most people know is the secretary there is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's his team that is taking the lead in writing the guidelines. And they really are not, they're rejecting the scientific report that came out under the Biden administration. We can talk about what some of the recommendations were of that report, but, mainly.
And it's interesting that she brought up Bobby Kennedy is actually, over HHS, because I don't know for sure, but I think he's either low carb or he's a carnivore. But dude is jacked. I mean, I don't know if you've seen him like working out and stuff on Instagram. Like he's running around without a shirt on and stuff, and he looks really good for his age, actually. So he's either low carb or carnivore, I believe. I might be mistaken about that, but I'm thinking he's one or the other.
It was a continuation of what we've been seeing in the guidelines over the last 40 years, which is a move away from animal proteins towards more beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, and so plant proteins. There's been a steady reduction in the amount of protein that people are told to eat, and they were recommending to continue 3 servings of refined grains every day. There was no reduction in the amount of grains people were told to eat. So that expert report under Biden has been scrapped. And now there will be a new dietary guidelines. Some of the hopeful signs, and it's true, I have been a little bit on the inside of this process, but public information that anybody can see is that FDA Commissioner Marty Makary has come out several times saying that he doesn't believe the cap on saturated fat, which is 10% of calories is saturated fats. He doesn't believe that we got it right on saturated fats, which really reflects the scientific consensus that's evolved over the last 15 years that the data never supported that limit on saturated fats. We can talk about that. Yep. But we're really up for a major change in the guidelines. And so...
yeah, and if you if you want to know about how saturated fat, animal fats got demonized, I have a video on that too.
They're super important, and I hope we can talk about one action item that your viewers and listeners can take while we still have some time to potentially influence them.
But I want you to understand that if in the United States, first of all, if you have any person that you know and care about who's getting free school lunch, free school breakfast, the summer breakfast and lunch program when school's out of session, if you have somebody in the nursing home, the hospital, in jail, in a prison, in the military, anybody, any organization that accepts federal funding to any degree, this is the way I understand it, Nina, if they accept $1 of federal money, then and they feed people, they have to follow the U.S. dietary guidelines is the way I understand it. Now, what if you're watching from another country? What if you're in Germany, South America, Australia? I've been seeing the comments. How does that affect you? Well, most countries literally copy and paste the U.S. dietary guidelines onto their country. Sometimes they'll make a few tweaks based on regional foods or stuff like that. But most of the time, your country's dietary guidelines are copy paste with a few small changes of what the U.S. dietary guidelines are. And I hinted at it earlier, Nina, that the U.S. federal government has been trying to make food dietary recommendations to Americans for many decades. At one point there were 7 food groups, then there were 5 food groups, then 4 food groups, and then the pyramid, the food pyramid, then the My Pyramid there for a few years.
Right.
And then starting with Michelle Obama, you remember she got very involved. She was going to fix the junk food in the school lunches. And so she was talking about food and exercise. And after the lobbyists had their way with her program, it wound up being called Let's Move. So it literally didn't, but they did come out with the MyPlate, which simplified the dietary recommendations of the federal government. How much, and you've been following this for years, how much impact does the big food lobbyist, how much?
I think he's about to ask how much impact lobbyists have on things, which, I mean, you kind of don't even need to ask that question because we all know. But I think the thing they did with the MyPlate, and if again, go check out my video about the history of all of that, like how it evolved, like what it came from, how it got started, because it is really interesting. But I think they did the MyPlate, and this is just my opinion, because when you looked at that pyramid and you saw that big old bottom full of grains and oatmeal, I mean, if we ate that way, I would be so big I wouldn't be able to get through the door. Good God. It was too obvious when you looked at that it was bunk. Right? The image itself, just as an image, you knew that it was crap. Just one glance, you're like, oh, hell no. So I think that the reason that they ditched the whole pyramid thing and they went to the MyPlate is because the MyPlate doesn't look like anything. It's just like, I'll show it here. It's like, it just looks like it's just a plate of crap. I mean, it's not even very obvious. It just doesn't mean anything really, but it didn't change much. So anyway, I just think that's funny because I think it was a PR nightmare by that time. Like everybody was making so much fun of the food pyramid. I think that they replaced it with that little stupid plate.
How much impact do they have? How many tentacles do they have into the Dietary Guidelines Committee? How much money is moving around behind the scenes that average people don't see?
So before I answer that, Ken, I just want to pick up on something that you said about that any program that receives any federal funding has to follow the guidelines. It really goes beyond that because the guidelines are considered the gold standard. So even if you're not taking federal money, if you are a large institution like a large medical practice or a hospital chain, you follow the guidelines because you fear going outside of the gold standard will get you in trouble legally. And the way that they also affect the whole world, as you said, they started as a cut and paste, but there's sort of an expert consensus in the world, and so long as every country agrees, that works. And so, there's no outlier. But if the US government comes out with a bunch of science from the US, from the highest level of authority, saying there's not evidence for a cap on saturated fats, or for instance, we should be eating fewer grains, and this is a body of evidence that shows that then ruptures the sort of the dominant expert opinion. There's an outlier now that other countries will have to deal with. I mean, either they'll say, oh, this is crazy, but they can't really ignore the science that I anticipate will come out to support these new guidelines. So to get to your question about the influence of the food and the pharmaceutical industries, because pharmaceutical industries also fund nearly all nutritionists and scientists that I have researched and investigated. At first, I didn't understand why. Like, why pharma? Well, pharma has a direct.
I think nutrition scientist is an oxymoron. Like, you can't, like I say about, and I think that there are certain studies you can do. It has to be focused and limited. The pharmaceutical industry has their hands into everything food because, like I say, the food industry feeds the pharmaceutical industry, and what it feeds them is patients. So,
direct interest in people using their pills, drugs, devices instead of diet to heal themselves just to give you one very stark example, on the 2015 committee, no, sorry, on the 2020 expert committee, there was an employee of the company that Nestle that makes the medical formulas for like the food that comes out of it's just supplement food. It's like formula food that you're supposed.
Oh, looks like we've lost Nina.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, there you are.
I think she's talking about, like, when she's saying formula food, I think she's talking about like the stuff the elderly people get, the Ensure. I think that's what she's trying to say. Like the little drinks or whatever.
So he was a medical director for Optifast or something while he's serving on the dietary guideline committee. Well, if you believe that a supplement based formula is the solution for obesity, you're not going to be invested in a food based solution. So we did a group of academics, researchers, and I did the first ever systematic review of the conflicts of interest on any dietary guideline committee that had ever been done. We did this for the 2020 committee. We found that 95% of this 20-person committee had at least one tie with food or pharma. By tie,
that's so ugly that like nobody had ever done that. Oh my God, like 95% of them are compromised. Ugh.
We mean like getting a research grant or sitting on a board or a scientific committee or even being employed by a food or pharma company. Half of that committee had 30 such ties or more, and one member of the committee had 152 ties with food and pharma. So, and there are other conflicts of interest. Like, some of the committee had been employed by the same government agency that puts out the guidelines. So there's all these ties that compel people to stick to the status quo, to re-up the status quo that the government has been endorsing. I mean, really, our guidelines have not changed in any fundamental way since 1980. So for 45 years, we've been taught the same diet, and there's a lot of there's an imperative to maintain that status quo and not to look at the new science and the evolving science to update the guidelines in a way that would reflect that science.
Yep. So for the last 40 years, every child in America that's in any way involved with any kind of public school, and many children, especially children of the lowest income families, the predominant amount of their food comes from school lunch, school breakfast, from the WIC program, Women, Infants, and Children, and from food stamps or the SNAP benefits, right? All of these follow the dietary guidelines. And so Nina just said for the last 45 years, this has been going on. Now, 45 years ago, guess what there was no such thing as? Type 2 diabetes in children. There was also no such thing as dietary-induced fatty liver in children. Those things.
Now, that goes back to what I was saying, that it's not that people ran out to a government website and started doing something. That has nothing to do with it. What it has to do with, all the government institutions were required to eat this crap, and they've been feeding systemically, regularly, like all the kids in public school, like that's what they eat all the time. So when we were growing up, we were eating this garbage growing up. That's what we ate. So it did a number on us. It did a number on the people who were growing up during these generations, since this crap came out. Well, since really processed food in general, but when the government stepped in and said, hey, I'm going to force y'all to eat this stuff, it existing is one thing, because back in the day, you had farms and people were eating, they weren't afraid of animal fats. They were eating animal fats, eating animals, eating eggs and bacon and all of these nutrient-dense foods. And then they were eating other things too, but not like the majority. So people then started to do what they had to do, the industrialized nation. So everybody was going to work and everybody sends their kid to school, and all of those places, you're eating crap most of the time. You're eating all these grains and stuff. So it started, and it's just gotten worse. And it's so simple. and easy to see what happened to us and why we got sick. So, it's not that, you're going to go run and look at their stupid pyramid because you're interested in it. It has to do with control and corruption.
Didn't exist. The rate of obesity in children was very close to zero. It was about 1% when I was in kindergarten. So
everybody I knew when I was a kid and everybody I saw in school, I think I remember in our entire school, there was one severely obese girl that I can remember. Now, I'm sure there was more people with weight problems, but only one that I remember this was in the 70s, like mid 70s, that I was in like elementary school. I didn't have any friends that were overweight, like kids. I don't remember anybody that was overweight as far as kids go. He's right about that.
While the federal government's dietary guidelines have been in effect for the last 40, 45 years, all of these new pediatric conditions have come out of nowhere. And some people are saying this is genetic. Some people are saying we don't know why this is happening. All the while.
Yes, we do.
It's directly,
in my opinion, but yes, we do.
Related to the food that these children have been eating, the very food that's been recommended by the federal government's dietary guidelines. Now, if you're new to the food wars, if you're just joining us, you might say, well, why would Big Pharma want to fund Big Food? Because Big Food's going to make all the money from that. Well, yes, Big Food does profit on the front end of that. But then after a few years of eating that child now has type 2 diabetes or fatty liver or is obese. Now Big Pharma is happy to step in and say, we've got a pill for that, or we've got an injection for that, or an infusion. So Big Food and Big Pharma are making out like bandits to the tune of multi-billions of dollars in profit, while the American children, young adults, are suffering from chronic diseases that are completely avoidable, completely preventable, and completely...
I don't know if any of you are getting as angry as I am. When I know all this and I say all this, I get on my soapbox and preach this on a regular basis. I mean, people run from me. They don't want to hear this because it is so sinister and so horrible, especially when you're thinking about little kids eating all this stuff and starting their life out that way. Because when you're little, you can fight things off better, but the damage is just tremendous. I get so angry when I listen to this and talk about this. I would imagine a lot of you do too, because this is just wrong on the deepest level of morality. It is just so wrong. And if you think of it in terms of children, especially.
Reversible, but in order to do that, you have to know about real human food. So if you haven't already done this, I guarantee you this affects your life, whether you know it or not. Please click the share button down at the bottom of the screen. Share this all over your social media, because the more people just like you that understand this problem and understand just what a huge problem this is, the quicker that Nina and I and everybody in this current administration, whether you like them or not, whether you like Trump or not, it's irrelevant. Whether you like RFK Jr. or not, that's irrelevant. We're talking about the health of our current children and the health of every future child born into America or anywhere that the American influence goes around the world. Please share this video. So, Nina, I know you've been involved for years in this fight, trying to get the dietary guidelines changed. Do you feel like that you see a ray of sunshine now with the current administration, the current atmosphere in DC? Are we liable to make some progress this go round?
Yeah, you make a really important point that this is not a partisan issue. Obesity, diabetes, the $1 trillion a day that we are spending on our healthcare due to these 85-90% of that goes to treating and managing chronic diseases. This is not a right or left issue. It really is an issue that affects everybody. Our military, a third of all recruits are not qualified, mainly due to obesity and being on medications. So we have a national problem this administration has elevated the issue of chronic disease. It's something that's long overdue, and I'm grateful to them for that. But this is an opportunity, and I do see a ray of light in these guidelines, in that, as I said, first of all, I think that they are re-examining the cap on saturated fats. Why is that so important? Saturated fats, the cap on those, which really dates back to like the early 1960s with the American Heart Association that started that, that limits the amount of red meat that people are allowed to eat, and meat with fat in it. You know, you need the fat in order to process the protein. You need the fat for satiety. So the cap on saturated fat limits the amount of real regular meat that people can eat, and also whole milk. You cannot have whole milk in the schools. I mean, we have only uh, non-fat milk, or 1% milk is allowed. You cannot even give away whole milk for free in any public school.
That skim milk and 1% milk is got to be one of the most disgusting things I've ever put in my mouth. It's horrible. I mean, it's God. I mean, that triggers me just thinking about drinking that.
And eggs. You can't get more than 3 eggs a week served for breakfast. So these are whole
3 eggs a week.
nutrient dense foods that are severely limited in the meal programs or any program that is following the guidelines due to the cap on saturated fats. Those foods are also the foods that contain all the essential nutrients that we need in order to survive. They're not optional nutrients, they're essential nutrients in the form that humans can absorb them. So, for instance, you cannot absorb.
She's talking about bioavailability, and I've talked at length about bioavailability because, like spinach, or there's a lot of vegetables that they're like, well, it's full of this vitamin or that vitamin. It's like, yeah, but you can't absorb it. So just because it's there doesn't make it good, especially if it's useless to a human, largely.
Absorb the iron that is in spinach. That is not well absorbed. Humans absorb heme iron. Heme iron is available in animal foods and principally red meat. So that's just one example. You can't get calcium well absorbed from vegetables. It's much better absorbed from dairy products. So we need these foods. They're also the source of complete proteins, meaning they have all the 9 essential fatty acids that you need to eat and consume in a single sitting in order to generate protein for your body, which has a huge range of functions in your body. It's not just your muscles, it's your immune system, your ability to resist infections. So lifting the cap on saturated fats, which is justified by the science, 100%, I think. We can talk about that, but that would be a huge and dramatic shift. I think there's also talk, although none of this is for sure, but I can just tell you the conversations that I hear about reducing the amount of sugar that's allowed down from 10% of calories. We should not have 10% of calories coming from a food that is not just empty calories, but actively drives insulin resistance and chronic disease.
That would be amazing, actually. I think that both of those, if you just got the lowering of the sugar and the the cap removed from the animal fats, that would be big progress. I mean, it would be great if you got rid of the suggested processed grains and things like that too, but I'd say those two changes it'd be going in the right direction.
Agreed.
There's conversation about reducing the amount of added sugars and grains, reducing refined grains. I mean, why are we recommending 3 servings of refined grains a day?
Why are we recommending refined anything? Anything that's refined being recommended, or, that just doesn't sound like a good idea. Like any kind of processed food shouldn't be recommended, because whether you eat it or not, it's like you shouldn't be recommended to eat processed food. I mean, not saying that you can't, but you should be recommended to eat the things that you know are healthy. But we know that processed food is not healthy, so it shouldn't really be recommended, if that makes sense.
Not be part of the guidelines. I mean, just an anecdote, I can tell you, I've looked at the USDA approved items that go to schools and to other institutions. I mean, there's literally individually sized Fruit Loops and Lucky Charms and Dora the Explorer cereal and lots of individually sized fruit juices, which is just sugar water. So those foods should not be allowed. They should not be elevated in any way or condoned by our guidelines. So I know that there are discussions about that. And the really important discussion that I want to share with your audience is that there is a consideration of including some language that allows for a low carbohydrate diet for people with metabolic diseases. This is the potential language that I hope people can maybe get loud about, because it's so important that that be an option. And just to give you a little bit of a broader perspective, when the guidelines were launched in 1980, as Ken said, Dr. Berry said, the rates of obesity were very low. For adults, they were below 12% obesity rates. Type 2 diabetes also low. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease also very low. So the population was generally healthy, and they created a guidelines to prevent disease.
Yep.
In a generally healthy population.
Yes, and let me interject, Nina. You're exactly right. So this is actually in the federal government's code, Title VII, Section 5341. It says, quote, to promote health and reduce the risk of chronic disease through improved nutrition and physical activity. And then it also says that this shall be intended for the general public.
Right.
But now we have a general public, 88% of them have at least one marker of metabolic dysfunction or metabolic disease. And so I think what you're saying, even if they just put in a caveat, oh, if you have diabetes or obesity or fatty liver or hypertension or metabolic syndrome, then you should consider a lower carbohydrate diet. Even that would be a huge victory. Is that what you think the compromise will wind up being? Or do you think we can hope for even more than that?
I think that would be enough. Just a sentence or two that for people with metabolic diseases, for people with obesity, type 2 diabetes, they should consider a low carbohydrate diet.
If they put that in the guidelines, even if it sounds like what he was describing, it is a major, major victory, because what it's doing is the system is acknowledging the existence of low carb diets as being valid. That is a big deal. So even though it sounds like, oh, well, it sounds a little weak and sounds like a little wussy, but it's not. It would be a big deal in the terms of like guidelines, recommendations, things like that.
Because it is an evidence-based option, and by that I mean it is supported by controlled clinical trials showing that these diseases can not just be prevented but reversed with a low or very low carbohydrate diet. I think without that language, the guidelines will not be complying with this law that you just cited, which is that they must be for the general public. The general public is sick. The general public is no longer healthy. The vast majority of American adults have one or more chronic disease, and the guidelines must serve that general public. So I know that it is a consideration and it is being discussed at the highest levels, but we really have to push for it, because I think anybody who's been in this space for any amount of time will recognize that there is a tremendous amount of bias against this nutritional approach. It's radically different than the low fat status quo. Has a reputation due to a lot of bad media and press as being somehow unsafe or dangerous or a fad. I mean, nothing could be farther from the truth, but there's a lot of resistance to a nutritional approach that actually gets people healthy. It's a threat to the junk food industry. It's a threat to the pharmaceutical industry, who part of their business model is managing chronic diseases with pills and injections. And getting people healthy with food will undermine that business model.
And keep in mind, that is all the pharmaceutical companies do. They just mitigate symptoms so that you can keep eating the garbage and keep causing the damage, and they can keep giving you pills. They don't cure anything. They don't make it so, you're ever cured of any of these things. It just is a way to keep you going. So they're all one big machine.
So we have to push for this. We have to know that there are a lot of stakeholders in Washington, everything from the crop farmers to the pharmaceutical industry to Kellogg's and General Mills, who will be pushing back hard on this language. And again, I just want to emphasize for people around the world, if the US government says the low carbohydrate diet is one safe and effective option, just an option, not for everyone, that changes the landscape for the whole world. It's sort of like letting the genie out of the bottle, and saying, having a high level authority say, this is really a viable and important option for people with these diseases.
Yep, I totally agree. And I want everybody watching this. We've got almost 3,600 people watching this right now. Tell me in the comments, yes or no, do you really think that this is something that should be changed in the U.S. dietary guidelines? Yes or no? It's a quick and easy answer. I just want to see what people are thinking about this right now, because I'm sure for some people this sounds a bit esoteric. I don't know what you're talking about, but I can tell you who is paying very careful attention to this, and it's every lobbyist from the big pharmaceutical companies. Every lobbyist from Kellogg's and Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola and Kraft Heinz and Mondelez, they're paying careful attention. And I'll bet you they're taking all the right people out to dinner. And it's not a vegan dinner, folks. It's steak and lobster. That's what they're taking them out to eat, even though steak and lobster is very bad for your health. That's what all of the people who have a vote on this are being taken out. Tell me, in the last few months, how active have you been getting feedback from your people inside this administration? How active are these lobbyists for big food and big pharma? Because they know.
It's funny him asking how active they are, because they're always active. The lobbyists are always active. They don't ever take a day off. So pharmaceutical lobbyists in particular is what I know of first and foremost, and they do not take days off.
That this is a potential outcome, that either we've got this caveat, or maybe the entire guidelines say, hey, you should stop eating 3 servings of ultra processed flour a day, which is currently acceptable by the current guidelines. Are you hearing of a lot of lobbyists really kicking back against this?
Yeah, I can tell you that the lobbyists, the polite term for them is stakeholders, and stakeholders, the need to satisfy stakeholders is a real concern of top administration officials. Probably the loudest group that I've heard about are the soy and wheat and corn farmers, who
all of the processed food is made primarily out of all that junk. So that's why those are the crops that actually make all that stuff.
Now about either low carb or ketogenic options, but yet they act like there's no research on this. And so that's the thing that's just mystifying, is the research is very clear about low carb and keto, but yet you're seeing that's getting a lot of kickback.
Yeah, so I mean, the amount of research is really right up there with, say, the Mediterranean diet, which everybody knows and has been endorsed. So let me give you a little bit, just open the, pull back the curtain on what's been happening in DC on low carb. I filed some what's called Freedom of Information Act requests to get emails from the 2015 dietary guideline process. I found that they did a secret review of low carb diets. A systematic review. It came out that the overwhelming number of studies in that review showed that low carb outperformed low fat for losing weight. And there was one member of the expert committee from Harvard who said, this is an important review. We need to talk about low carb. People will accuse us of not paying attention to this data. It's very powerful. There's so much of it. This is 2015. The USDA officials in charge of the process decided to bury that evidence and not include it in the report. And this Harvard professor pipes up and says, I don't think we should be burying this data, literally using that word. So there was a review. It was buried in 2015. In the next cycle of the guidelines, 2020, they, in part because my organization got so many thousands of people to write comments. We had tens of thousands of people writing comments saying, we want a review of low carbohydrate diets. It was the most commented upon topic of any in the public comment period. They did a review on low carbohydrate diets. They could not find a single study on low carb in 2020. They, which was incredible. I mean, they did not find even a study whose first author was a member of the expert committee itself. They somehow set the inclusion-exclusion criteria in a way that just that blinded them all of the literature on low carbohydrate diets, which at that point probably there were over 1,000 studies on low carbohydrate diets.
Mm-hmm.
In this Biden administration committee, they didn't review the clinical trial literature. What they did is they did some computer modeling on low carbohydrate diets in which they took out all of the carbohydrates out of a diet in a computer model. Okay, this is a very low quality evidence. Like, when you have actual clinical trials on humans, why are you doing computer modeling? They took out all the calories and carbohydrates and then didn't replace them with anything. So now you have a diet you're looking at, which is like calorically only 50% of what it should be normally. And then they said, well, this is a nutritionally deficient diet and it doesn't have enough energy in it, because they didn't replace the carbohydrates with anything else. So
Well, that's
these are
obviously
like
not
literally
sustainable because you'd be
shenanigans.
starving to death.
What?
I said that's obviously not sustainable because you'd be starving. So I just want everybody to really grasp the amount of foolishness that's been going on over the U.S. dietary guidelines for the last few decades.
I wouldn't even call it foolishness. I would call it criminal. I would call it sinister. I would call it it's just not, it's morally bankrupt.
They literally did a secret review of the low carb ketogenic research and said, oh yeah, this actually helps better than any other dietary option to help people lose weight. And then they buried it. So there's only two reasons that you're working. You're either working to improve people's health, everybody's health, or you're working to improve certain people's profit. Please tell me in the comments, do you think the members of the Dietary Guideline Committee, were they working for health or for profit? Everybody watching, tell me in the comments. I want to see what your gut feeling about this is. Go ahead, Nina. I'm sorry. It makes me furious to know that people in positions of authority had the evidence right in front of them, but yet I guess the paychecks that they get, the stock dividends, whatever, I don't know, but something is more important to them than the health of every American. That doesn't compute with my brain, but I'm
Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. And so does all of this money. You're talking about more money than God. That's why it's hard for me, people in my family who still are drinking the Kool-Aid, and they're sick and they're getting sicker and they're still drinking the Kool-Aid. Every day they're drinking more and more of the Kool-Aid. And it's hard to watch, especially people that you love, just, fading away.
Just a few weeks ago, there was a new study that came out that literally every science alert, every science journal, every science website, every medical nutrition website said, oh, keto will increase your risk of aging prematurely. And so if you just read the headline, you'd be like, oh, God, I probably shouldn't do keto. Well, if you read 2 or 3 paragraphs in, you find it's a mouse study, even though, and it's
I want to know, like, were they like measuring the bags under the mice's eyes? Or like, I'm sorry. Some of these things are just funny.
Checking markers that we never check in humans. Humans don't even have some of these markers. This is a mouse study. But as Nina just said, there are over 1,000 research studies in human beings about low carb and ketogenic diets. But yet they're just gonna get up on the rooftops and shout about this mouse study and how keto will make you age prematurely. What else can you call that besides propaganda?
I mean, it just happens again and again. There's so many of these studies that say keto will, again, shorten your life, increase mortality. All of those studies, I reviewed all of them for a peer-reviewed study that came out a couple of years ago, and again for another paper I did recently. These are peer-reviewed journals. All of those studies misdefined a low carbohydrate diet, right? So a low carbohydrate diet is tops 25% of calories as carbohydrates, or 130 grams, 100 grams, or lower. None of these studies defined a low carbohydrate diet accurately.
Exactly.
And so you have to, and there are accurate definitions that are published. They're in the scientific literature. They've been in many papers by leading researchers in the field. They've converged upon a definition. And so you have to conclude this is like a willful act of distorting this scientific literature to try to keep low carbohydrate diets out of consideration.
So one of the things that happens is the way they define their terms, the way they design the protocol. It's like, well, they say low carb diet. They use that terminology. And what they're talking about, like she said, is what, 125 grams a day? Like that's not low carb. Everybody knows it's not. They know it's not. But it's the games that you play it.
So this is why, for people listening, it's really important if reducing carbohydrates has affected your life and you would like to see this just as an option, right? A sentence, 2 sentences in the dietary guidelines. It's really important if you're on social media to post something about this issue. There's a website that we have now called Low Carb Maha, MAHA, lowcarbmaha.org, where you can see some talking points and there's some graphics you can share. And people that you can tag in government. It's really important that they know that we are also a stakeholder. The public, that's as Ken said, they're hearing from lobbyists, they're hearing from mandalas, they're hearing from Unilever, they're hearing from their crop farmers. We are also a stakeholder, the public, but we are easy to ignore if we're not heard. So it's important for people to know. It's important for these administration officials to know that we exist, our voices exist. We want options to get healthy. We ought to be uppermost in their minds. But if we're silent, it's easy for them to forget when there's so many other people knocking at their door.
Absolutely correct. So I would encourage every single one of you, tell your story about a low carb diet, a ketogenic diet, or even a carnivore diet, how it's improved your health on your social media, and tag your U.S. congressman, tag
Not
your
the
U.S.
congressman.
senator.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm super sorry.
I'm going to tag them all, but I'm going to get to your point. I want you to tag your congressman, tag your senator, tag RFK Jr., tag Marty McCary, tag Donald Trump. But who specifically, Nina, do you want them to tag?
Yeah, so I'm sorry to interrupt, Ken, but it's not the congressmen and the senators who are involved in this now. It's much more.
Because they're completely worthless. That's why she's saying that. It's just funny. Look at where I paused his face. But I mean, I'm assuming that's why she's saying, like, well, they're not going to do anything, because, oh my God, what's more worthless than, I don't know, the House and the Senate? Not much.
It's
Agreed.
they're
But
on low.
In general, ever. I'm just saying, just in general, like, I don't know.
Congressman gets 10,000 tags and 10,000 emails, they might just make a phone call in DC.
So you're correct. They might, but we're far enough along in this process that it's. I mean, I would tag. So I put in low carb Maha who to tag. I mean, Health and Human Services, USDA Nutrition Department, Callie Means, who's really involved, who's probably the most important person in nutrition policy in Washington, D.C. right now. I would tag some of those folks.
Yeah, so Callie Means actually used to be a lobbyist, and now he's kind of like a whistleblower for the nutrition space or something. I mean, I've listened to a lot of his interviews. Very interesting. I believe he used to lobby for Coca-Cola, and he's got some horror stories.
Directly involved in the process.
Yep. So Marty McCary, because the food guidelines they're actually overseen by both the USDA and the FDA, according to the federal regulations. It's kind of a joint. That's how it's supposed to be, anyway. But I don't know if that's how it actually is.
It's not FDA. It's HHS, and FDA is under HHS. So it's jointly issued by USDA and HHS. So it's really the leadership. It's the office of the the assistant secretary, OASH, it's called, at HHS, that is in charge of the dietary guidelines at HHS.
So tell us again, Nina, who do you want us to tag on social media?
Well, it's easier if they go to this website so they can get the tags right. But
okay, comments.
Yeah. And so again, it's just really important that people's voices be heard. And you can be a voice from overseas. You can be a voice from anywhere. The U.S. guidelines really do lead the world, and we have to break through this sort of wall of status quo advice in that is global and get this option out there to the public. It's really been too long that people with all these diseases have no official effective advice about how to reverse these diseases. Like it really is a tragedy. If you have type 2 diabetes, you are told to, have your waffles with your maple syrup and just cover it with insulin.
Yep.
That is the universal advice. If you have fatty liver disease, you are not told to reduce fruit juice or sugars. It's just, we must have this advice coming out from an official government agency. I think that will just break the dam for this nutritional approach all over the world.
Yep. And as Nina said earlier, in every day that a small child gets a free school breakfast, free school lunch, they are getting little individual serving sizes of Fruit Loops, aka Big Food Products.
Every time I hear this, it makes me so angry. Oh my God, I get like a case of rage, just listening to that. And I think it bothers Dr. Berry too. I've heard him say this before.
And every time you feed a little child Fruit Loops and then some orange juice or some skim milk, you're increasing that child's risk of diabetes, of obesity, of fatty liver, of metabolic syndrome. And then Big Pharma's happy to step in and say, we've got some Ozempic or we've got some insulin. We'll take care of this child. And so Big Food and Big Pharma are making out like bandits on both ends of this equation. And the people who are suffering are the young children in America and all over the world, the young adults, our military people, people in hospitals, people in nursing homes, the regular folks who currently don't have a voice. They're the ones that suffer. The people who have a voice, aka a stakeholder, aka a lobbyist in DC, they're making out like bandits. And so if you're happy with that situation, then keep your mouth shut and move along. But if you're not happy with that, go to lowcarbmaha.org. There's downloadable graphics. They tell you who you should tag, who you should reach out to. And you can make a difference if enough tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in America especially, but really all over the world. This needs to be the loudest noise that these stakeholders have heard in a long damn time. That's what needs to happen. And Nina needs you to do that. The children who are suffering every day with the beginnings of metabolic disease, they don't have a lobbyist. Let's just make that very clear. The poorest children in America, they don't have a lobbyist at this table. You have to step up and speak up and be their lobbyist. Yell at these people loud enough, consistently enough until they say, damn it, these people, they're just not going to shut up until we put a low carb option in the dietary guidelines. What else can people do, Nina?
I think that's really the main thing that people need to do. It's interesting that this is an administration that really lives on X, formerly known as Twitter. That is where they get their information. That is where they talk to each other. That is where global announcements are made. So if you have an X account, that is really where you can get loud and really go after these agencies and urge them and let them know you're out there. And again, it's like, even if you fix your health and the health of your family, there are kids all over America who are getting, packaged waffles with high fructose corn syrup for breakfast. That is destroying their metabolism. And, as you know, I think people recognize that once you tip over into ill health, like metabolic disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, it is so much harder to get healthy than it is if you can prevent those diseases in the first place. Like, we should not live in a country where a broken metabolism is the norm, which is what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can see it from another perspective. We don't have a military that can really perform well. I mean, you see them, there's a whole campaign to be more fit and do push-ups and pull-ups. But I think many of us know that you cannot exercise your way out of a bad diet. Mm-hmm. These folks are overweight in the military, despite doing regular PT, due to their diet.
Yep.
In the military. So we need a functional military. We need not to have $4 trillion a day. $1 trillion a day on these diseases that are bankrupting our country. I mean, there are many reasons other than.
And I would say, it's a national security issue. If you have really unhealthy soldiers, that's not a very good idea.
Just personal health. I mean, the whole health of the nation really depends upon this.
I totally agree, and I think when you paint the picture like that, I think everybody gets it, because if you're in the United States taxpayer, think about Medicaid. In Tennessee, we call it TennCare. For every new type 2 diabetic who's in a lower socioeconomic situation, they're going to be on Medicaid, and you, the taxpayer, are going to foot the bill for that. That's going to happen. And so what if we could reverse type 2 diabetes in hundreds of thousands or even millions of people who can't afford their own health insurance, and then they could come off of Medicaid because they're not sick anymore? Think of the trillions of dollars that could be saved. Think of a military that is so metabolically sick right now that I think it's a national security issue. I think this is a huge deal. It's hard to fight for your country if your blood sugar is 250 and your vision is blurry and you've got brain fog because you're metabolically sick, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, there's quite a high proportion of the military that is unable to serve at any one point in time, and I forget the exact percent, but it's really considered one of their major problems. And the main reason for inability to serve is musculoskeletal injury due to excess weight, which is, you get injured when you're trying to do PT with an extra 50 pounds on your body. So it truly inhibits our military readiness. I think it's a national security issue. It's been called a national security by some of our top generals in the country. There's no question that this is an emergency. What there is a reluctance to embrace what is the evidence-based solution, right? there's a recognition now in this administration that we have a huge problem. But what I have seen so far in the last year of MAHA is that while they are going after food dyes and extra ingredients in ultra processed foods and getting sugar out of the SNAP program, which these are all great measures, but they have yet to really embrace the one evidence-based nutritional approach, the food approach that will reverse disease. So we
Yep.
have to speak up for that. This is the time. I think there's a receptive ear in this administration, but they haven't gone the distance on this. And so we need to push them over the edge.
I totally agree. Give us a little bit of hope, Nina. How high up have you heard positive feedback in the current administration for at least including a blurb about low carb diets in the next U.S. dietary guidelines? Have you heard some good positive vibes from higher up in the administration?
Yeah, I can't go into any specifics,
Of course.
obviously. Yes, but I will tell you that it is being considered at the highest levels, at the very highest levels. And I also know that there is pushback in some quarters. And so that is why really your voice out there will make a difference. I truly believe that hearing from the public will make a difference, especially if you have a large following. They are listening out there on X. They are watching out there on X. And so it's really important for people right now to make their voices heard.
I agree. And so crawling across the bottom of the screen, lowcarbmaha.org. I've spelled that right, Nina? Does that look right?
Yeah, I have to put my glasses on. I can't see it. It's so small. Yep, that looks great.
Okay, go to that website. They have downloadable graphics. And if you don't have an X account or a Twitter account and you really want to get some traction, you need to be on X, because that's where all of the middle to upper level administrative people are, or Blue Sky, I guess, and that's fine if that's your political leaning. But you've got to be tweeting these people, retweeting these people, saying, hey, what about a low carb option? Because 88% of U.S. adults currently have at least one marker of metabolic disease. So only 12% of American adults are completely healthy. So if we're going to have guidelines that address all of the public, there has to be a low carb option in the dietary guidelines. I know you can't name any names, Nina, because you're kind of working behind the scenes. But how high up is the pushback coming from? Is that just as high up the chain of command, or is that just coming from lobbyists, or are there people in administration saying, yeah, we're not going to do the low carb thing?
I think I just should not get into.
Of course, there's people in the administration that want the status quo. There's always people in every administration that's going to give that advice. That's just the way politics works. No matter where it is, it's just politics.
That level of detail.
Okay, I thought you might have a comment on that.
I mean, I think you've done a pretty good job of describing how powerful these lobbyist groups are. They're in DC every day. They have the doors of the administration are open to them. They're going out to dinner and lunch and having meetings. I mean, they are the permanent residents of DC. There are some of us who come in for visits, and then we try to be heard, but really the permanent class of people in DC who are daily in touch with administration officials are lobbyists, and they know the system much better than we do. So we have to do what we can, and I think that's getting loud on social media.
I totally agree. So every single one of you guys who's improved your health with either a low carb diet, a keto diet, a ketovore diet, or a carnivore diet, go to the website crawling across the bottom of your screen. Download the graphics, get on X or Twitter and post that graphic and say, hey, and shout out the people that Nina has listed on lowcarbmaha.org that need to be shouted out. Wrap us up, Nina, and tell us one more time what we need to know.
All right, go to Low Carb Maha, get some graphics, tag some people, share it on X or other social media, and really let's push for this. In the next couple of weeks, I think we can really make a difference. So
I totally agree.
don't waste
Totally.
a moment.
Yes. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much,
Ken.
Nina. Thank you for your public face, your book, and all of your work on social media and writing reports that have been published in very prestigious journals. Thank you for all, but also really thank you for the work you're doing behind the scenes right now, trying to talk some common sense into people in DC who are not known for their high levels of common sense. Thank you so much for the work you're doing, and thank you for doing this interview.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Let me know in the comments section down below what you think of all of this. Do you think there's a snowball's chance in hell that we'll actually see the dietary guidelines change? Do you think that a low-carb option will be included? Are we finally going to be able to remove the tinfoil hat and be acknowledged as valid? Or do you think there's no chance of that? Let me know. I'll be interested to know what your opinions are on this. And if you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos or live streams. And also go check out Dr. Berry's video, the full video, because we didn't go over everything here. And definitely check out the link below for the Maha site so that you can actually push out the right information to promote this, if you believe that it's supposed to be an option. Again, thank you guys for watching so much, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.